All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a little bit of time here, no more than 15 minutes, that's my goal, in order to talk about the document-based question. That's the longer of the two essays on the AP exam for us, and I want to spend particularly some of our time talking about the DBQ that we have to write for next week, Monday, October 30th, in regards to the development of the institution of slavery. So I have that DBQ in front of me. Let me show you all the documents I have in front of me. This is one. Now, remember I said in class, ladies and gentlemen, that the front page here is the old style of the rubric. You'll want to ignore this because otherwise you'll be trying to earn points that aren't on the rubric anymore and you'll be spending your time poorly. But for our purposes, we're starting there where the prompt takes place. I also have a copy of the real rubric. This is on the front of your packet that I gave you about the American Revolution DBQ. Have a look at that there. And I have the American Revolution DBQ packet. That's there as well. So those three documents I might be referring to as we go through the ways. Now, you don't have a separate copy of the rubric here that I have in front of me, but you do have the DBQ and the packet as well. And with those two things, we should be in good shape. Before we start, let's understand what we're trying to do. The DBQ, or document-based question, is an essay that attempts to provide an analytical response to a historical question. It is not necessarily just an exercise in scoring points. The moment we start seeing it as simple checking of boxes, we risk moving away from writing a good, strong essay, and that is not where we need to go. Most DBQs end up failing because the student doesn't offer the sort of higher level thinking skills that the College Board is interested in seeing. We want to make sure that we provide those higher level thinking skills. Otherwise, our essays aren't going to end up being of the caliber that we want them to be. So we have to make sure that whenever we say something, we are considering how we might analyze that information in order to connect it back to the overall issue at hand in the essay. So always higher level thinking skills, analysis. That's what the College Board rewards on these rubrics. That's what we should be practicing to try and earn. What to do first? Read the documents. If you haven't already given documents 1 through 7 a good look, now's the time to do that. I'll wait. All right, now we're done. Okay, good reading job, by the way. I like that. Now I want to make sure that we move on in the right order. You don't necessarily have to start with the introductory paragraph as the first paragraph you're writing. You really have 45 minutes from here on out to write the essay after you've read and planned. And so it may be the case that you want to write one of the body paragraphs first. But for our purposes, what I'll call the introductory paragraph is the paragraph that would start the essay off in a general sense. Two things normally happen in that paragraph. Looking at my rubric here. Normally, I find a thesis and I find contextualization. That's not 100% guaranteed. The contextualization could happen in one of a few ways. It could either happen at the beginning of the essay, at the end of the essay, or in the midst of it. Let's talk about how. Contextualization is the overall broader theme of history. It's what's going on while the topic is taking place, or perhaps what introduces the background of the topic, or perhaps gives us a view of where the topic goes as we exit the prompt area and move on the historical chain of events. So in that sense, the contextualization could show up in the introductory paragraph, perhaps laying down the foundation of where we're headed, as it did, to borrow a couple of examples in both essays A and B in our sample packet, where the authors laid down the French and Indian War, the English debt, the policies of George III, in order to show us where the essay would go. It could happen at the end, as we saw, I believe, in essay D. Let me check that. Essay, no, I beg your pardon, it's essay E. In essay E, we see the author at the end make reference to the Constitution and how the issues at hand in America and revolution still hang on as we head into the constitutional period. So that would be an aspect of contextualization. Now, have a look at essay C if you're looking for how it's not done. In essay C, the individual who wrote the essay tries to link the taxes put on Americans as being the contextualization, but doesn't offer enough depth. Contextualization has to be, I think, a few sentences. If you're trying to get away with it with less than that, it doesn't have enough meat, enough real muscle in order to earn the points. So make sure that you're connecting it back to the overall topic. Make sure you give it some depth. The thesis after that, it has to make sure that it directly responds to the prompt. And in this case, the prompt is to explain the causes of the development of the institution of slavery in the period from 1607 to 1705. A couple of things. We're asked for causes. So you want to make sure that you provide more than one. There's more than one reason why this takes place. And number two, we're asked about the institution of slavery. In other words, not just that there was slavery, but what did that slavery look like over the period of time? The essay asks us from 1607 to 1750, and the documents span that time pretty well. It's important for us not to put forward an essay in which slavery is and always is the same throughout the entire essay. I just had to take synergy off the screen. The thing jumps you even during the day, I tell you. Moving on. So when you're writing the essay, make sure that slavery as an institution is shaped by things happening around it, so that as you read the documents, you get a sense of change in slavery. It doesn't show up in 1607 and exit in 1750 as the same institution. How does that change? What does the change look like? That's where the essay needs to go, and that's what you need to reflect in your thesis. How does the institution of slavery develop? In other words, change. How does it morph over time into something different than what it was in 1607? Some sort of clear statement of that will be necessary for the thesis, which can appear in the introductory paragraph or in the last paragraph of the essay. But it must appear in its full form in one of those two places in order to earn the point. And with that, we have an introductory paragraph. From there on out, there's no set formula of where things have to go. But let's look at the rubric and answer where we need to see things. Here's the rubric, just to make sure we're looking at the same document, ladies and gentlemen. There she is. Evidence from the documents. I'm required to use at least three essays, I beg your pardon, 3 documents, I should say, or 6 of them if I want 2 points, in order to earn points in the rubric. Now, the use of the documents cannot be summation. If you're looking for a ridiculously bad example of how this is not to be done, go back to Essay D. That's the one where the individual, if you remember when we read it, the individual is laundry listing the documents. That is to say, they are simply saying document 1 says this, document 2 says this, document 3 says this. That's not good enough. You have to make sure that you are linking the documents back to the overall question so that I understand why what happens in document 1 is necessary for me to see the overall context of things. Make sure that the documents add up to your argument, in other words. You're trying to prove a point about the development of slavery over time. How does document 1, how does document 2 help you to do that? Instead of just saying, this is what document does, or document 1 says, you figure it out. No, you need to tell the reader what it is about document 1 that allows you to amass an argument over the course of the essay. What is it about that particular document that says, here's a change in the institution of slavery, or here's a further change in the institution of slavery? Be sure that you're doing that consistently with the documents. It's going to take time, but if you don't do it, you risk simply missing out on 2 points here. And if there's only 7 available, 2 is a lot of 7. I'm no mathematician, but that's many percents. Now, after we finish with that portion, there's a portion underneath that says evidence beyond the documents. You need some specific development, individual, event, trend, something going on in that period of time that helps us to understand what's happening in the essay without it being something already in the documents. That is to say, you couldn't say, for instance, just mention the phrase indentured servants. That's really in there already. Okay? And if you're going to use Bacon's Rebellion, which is strongly referenced in document 5, you're going to have to make sure you bring some other information about Bacon's Rebellion that's helpful for us to understand what's happening over the grand scheme of slavery. So, whatever it is that you choose, again, make sure that it links back to the document. Don't just say, hey, by the way, this happened in 1740, and I'm just going to leave it here for you to think about. Doesn't work that way. You have to make sure you explain how that event then contributes to the change that's going on in slavery or is related to the overall course of things that's happening with our essay. So make sure that that piece of information is thoroughly explained and then thoroughly linked up to the overall argument you're making in the essay. We move on to the last couple of portions, analysis and reasoning. Now, in the first point here, you want to make sure that you look at one of a few things. And I'm going to cheat by looking at my notes for a moment because I've sectioned off some good examples of things. But in one of 4 ways, you need to explain the relevancy of one of these types of analysis that goes into the document. In other words, you have to explain, in one case, the point of view of the author. Why does the author feel this way? What is it about their background that informs us as to how the document should be understood? Like in sample essay B, document 4, the author, I beg your pardon, does a good job of talking about the Quakers and their background as pacifists. So we use that information to understand why the Quakers might be reticent about the brewing war coming down the road. Point of view is not opinion. It's not saying their point of view is blank. For instance, it's my point of view that this shirt I'm wearing is quite plain, but that's not a point of view reference. Okay, if you brought in a fashion designer and the fashion designer said, well, I've been in fashion design for 46 years, and I'll tell you that that shirt's plain, the point of view is that they're a fashion designer. They have a background in it. It helps them to explain their expertise. Okay, if you're looking for purpose, another type of analysis, have a look at essay F. Where in document 6, they do a good job of explaining the purpose of the author. What does the author hope to achieve? What is it they're trying to get done here? Don't say that they're saying it just to say it. Human beings don't work that way. We're always trying to convince, to defend, to hope that something starts. You're always trying to do something when you say something, right? I'm making a video here. My purpose is not merely to record 15 minutes of myself. My purpose is to see my students do better on the document-based question. My purpose is to see them do better overall, to have them feel more comfortable with it. That's my purpose. Historical situation. In historical situation, you're laying down the context, and it can be very much like contextualization in that sense, of where the document fits. The historical situation is the background of the document that might help us in order to understand it. If you're looking for reference, look at sample essay A and sample essay B, both of which do a great job with historical situation. And lastly, audience. Who are you trying to talk to, and why does that matter? In other words, this document is intended for a certain group of people. Why does it matter that I'm trying to reach them, right? I'm going to make a YouTube video of this. I'm going to publish it on YouTube. I'm going to encourage my students to watch it. That's my intended audience because I hope they do better on the DBQ. It's not that I want this to go global and for people on TMZ to be like, oh my God, this guy's got YouTube videos. I don't want that. I want students to do better on the DBQ. That's my intended audience. Explaining that in the essay is an attempt to assure that a reader understands where that document's supposed to go, what you're supposed to get out of it as an overall document. And lastly, the second point under analysis is earned by, over the course of time, showing a complex understanding of the essay. As best as I can understand this or explain this, the College Board wants you to make sure that as you go along, you are indicating how something is occurring or how something is changing. In this essay, we're talking about the developments in the institution of slavery. And I said earlier on that part of that was how slavery was changing, how it was becoming different over time. Simply saying at the beginning that it did change or would change, and then at the end saying that it did change is not enough. You need to be showing a more complex line of thought. You need to be at the end of paragraphs or after documents logging in analysis that shows that you understand you're watching the change in an institution over time, that you see slavery developing, that this document or these events build up to a change in slavery over time. Consistently driving that point home shows the College Board that you're not haphazard, that you're persistent, and that you're aware of your persistency in trying to make a point. Good luck with the DBQ. Message me with any questions. Take care.